XC, trail, enduro and downhill, and now there's even down country and all mountain as well. And let's not get started about geometry and travel too. Buying the right bike can definitely be confusing. So in the first part of the 2022 Mountain Bike Buyer's Guide, let's figure out which bike is the right one for you. Hey everyone, Phil from Trail Talk here, and as with all my buyer's guides, I'm not here to waste any of your time. So I've left chapters down below, so if you want to skip ahead to the relevant part of the video to you, you can do that. But if you're looking for particular bike models I'll recommend, I'll leave the playlist for my 2021 buyer's guides in the description below. And I'd also recommend subscribing to the channel because the 2022 buyer's guides will be coming out soon as well. So this video is really about understanding which is the right bike for you, so then you can go in and watch the specific buyer's guide that's relevant to your riding style. So let's jump into a general overview and then we can get into the specifics of each bike category. So in short, on one end of the spectrum, you've got XC bikes, and these are really gonna prioritize weight, agility, efficiency, and gonna have around about 100 millimeters of travel. And as we move to the other end of the spectrum, we've got enduro bikes, which sacrifice a bit of efficiency as well as agility for outright descending performance and stability at speed. This means you get stuff like a slacker head angle, burly components, and around 150 to 170 millimeters of travel. And then we move back into that happy medium, which is a trail bike, so your classic mountain bike, and these are gonna balance descending performance as well as climbing performance. And then we've even got downhill bikes with 200 millimeters of travel, which are purely built just to go down the mountain as fast as possible. So that's the basics. It's also important to note that shorter travel bikes are gonna have more budget options. And this is mainly because the terrain is less demanding, so the components don't need to be as durable and strong. And they'll typically tailor more to the general public that's gonna be riding smoother trails and fire trails and double track too. But a word of warning, after spending many years in working in a bike shop, just because these bikes are cheaper and might fit your budget, does not mean they fit your riding style or the needs of the terrain that you'll be riding. For example, this happens all the time. A lot of kids, they want to do some crazy stuff on their bikes, so they'll buy an XC entry-level hardtail and then they'll take it on downhill trails, which usually ends in the bike breaking pretty quickly. Taking an XC bike on a downhill trail is the equivalent of drinking soup with a fork. It's not the right tool for the job. So it's better to save up a little or even buy a bike that's used in the category of riding that you'll be doing. But enough of that lecture, let's get into the specifics of each category. So let's start with cross-country bikes, and these bikes are designed to be as fast and efficient as possible. They work best on fire trails, double track, and smoother single track, and typically more undulating terrain or areas where you're covering a lot of distance and there's going to be a fair bit of climbing too. They're capable enough to deal with a little bit of tech as well. You'll find on a lot of cross-country tracks, especially race tracks, there's a few sections with a few features, so there might be rooty sections, small rock gardens, little chutes, and very small jumps and drops too. But typically on these type of bikes in these sections, they're best navigated with a bit more precision and lower speeds. So usually I would recommend these bikes for someone getting into the sport that's just going to be riding more fire trails and exploring nature a bit more, or someone who purely races cross-country. So cross-country bikes come in both hardtails as well as dual suspension bikes, and they usually have 100 millimeters of travel, and the head angle is going to be anywhere from around 70 to even 67.5 degrees these days. These make these bikes fast, playful, and have very quick steering, so you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get around a corner. But as I said earlier, because the terrain is less demanding, there's more budget options, and these will typically be a classic entry-level mountain bikes. So there's options from all the way from $400 all the way up to $10,000 if you want to go crazy. On the more budget end, you'll typically find 3x drivetrains, but ideally if you can stretch your budget, 2x or even 1x is a better option here. Other things you want to keep an eye out for is disc brakes, again ideally hydraulic, and then you want a fork with around about 30 to 32 millimeter stanchions that hasn't got a welded arch, you want something that's cast, and some fast rolling tires too. Budget examples would be something like the Polygon Premier, the Trek Marlin, or the Specialized Rockhopper. And on the expensive ends for your crazy fast XC bikes, you've got stuff like the Specialized Epic and Giant Anthem. Downcountry bikes are pretty much more aggressive cross-country bikes or shorter travel trail bikes with geometry that isn't too crazy long or slack. If you aren't racing cross-country and you're ideally getting your first mountain bike to ride and tackle some single track with some small technical features, these are the bikes that I would recommend, especially if you're going to be doing mostly XC and trail riding. For me, it's the perfect entry-level bike because they're fast and efficient while they're still really fun and agile, but they're capable enough to get you out of trouble and start tackling some more technical features too. Another great use case is big all-day epic rides. The bikes are efficient enough to do that, but they're a little bit more capable to handle those descents. So they're going to be able to tackle some green and blue level descents with some decent elevation. So these bikes typically have 110 to 120 millimeters of travel, and the head angles are going to be around about 67.5 to 66.5 degrees. At this point, you really want a 1x drivetrain, hydraulic disc brakes, tubeless tire compatibility, and then a dropper post as well as air suspension's nice, or at least the compatibility to easily run this stuff in the future. You'd also want a cockpit that inspires a bit of confidence, so something with a nice short stem and some wide bars. And on the more budget end, you'll still see quick release axles, so on those smoother trails, they'll be fine, but if you're going to start tackling some more difficult stuff, I'd recommend getting a bike with through axles. So what's great about these bikes is you can get some really great trail-ready options at a decent price, so around $800 to $1,000. So there's going to be bikes like my Marin Bobcat Trail 4 that I've reviewed recently, and then a Vetus Nucleus is a great option as well to start hitting the trails. And you can even get some pretty capable dual suspension bikes at around $1,800 to $2.5 grand. So that's going to be stuff like your Merida 120 and Polygon Siskiyou D, and your classic downcountry bikes as well. So there's beefed up XC bikes, so something like the Specialized Epic Evo or the Transition Spur. Onto trail bikes now, and this is my favorite category of bike. If you have one bike and you ride everything from trail, XC, and even some enduro, a trail bike is the bike for you. They balance climbing and descending really well and allow you to still have plenty of fun on more undulating trails. If you predominantly ride kind of intermediate level trails, so those blue trails from flow to tech, and then starting to ride some black trails as well, so that advanced stuff, I think this is going to be a great option for you. A trail bike will allow you to start progressing on jumps and drops too, and you'll even be able to start hitting some features at the bike park too, so really riding those green and blue trails at the bike park. This is thanks to the 120 to 140 millimeters of travel, but also thanks to the improvements in geometry. So you'll see some longer reaches and slacker head angles at around about 65.5 to 66.5 degrees. Key spec to keep an eye on, you want that dropper post now, 1x drivetrain, air suspension front and rear, hydraulic disc brakes, tubeless rims and tires, so you really want that for factory. And the fork, you want to have around about 34 to 35 millimeter stanchions, so it's going to be a little bit stiffer to handle with those more technical descents. There's some great options out there now, so hardtails like the Marin San Quentin, Giant Fathom, and Merida Big Trail, and these start at around about $1,500 to $2,000. But there's some really capable dual suspension bikes, especially at a great price point, so around about $2,500 to $3,000. You've got bikes like the Polygon Siskiyou T8 that I've had for a while, and the Marin Rift Zone. And then they've got their classic trail bikes as well, like your Specialized Stump Jumper, and then also the Trek Fuel as well. So let's move into all mountain bikes, and I like to think of these as mini enduro bikes or overbuilt trail bikes. They're for someone who really likes the more playful nature of a trail bike, but really likes the descent, so they're really prioritizing the descending over the climbing. And for this kind of rider, you're riding typically a 50-50 split of intermediate and advanced level descents, so there's blue and black stuff. They're also a great option for someone who's riding mostly enduro trails, but not necessarily attacking them at the high speed that racers might, so picking their way more down those technical sections. So all mountain bikes have around about 140 to 150 millimeters of travel, and your head angles are going to be around about 65.5 to 64.5 degrees, so getting pretty slack now, so they're pretty capable at speed. So they'll usually have all the features of a trail bike that are listed above, but they're going to have more burly suspension, so you're going to have forks with stanchions around 35 to 36 millimeters, so pretty much enduro forks. And you're going to have a piggyback reservoir on most of the shocks too, probably except the entry-level model, and these are going to allow you to go on longer descents without the shock overheating. And you're also going to start to see more tacky compounds on the tires, so give you a bit more grip, as well as some more puncture resistant casings too. And then you're going to start seeing a lot more 4-piston brakes as well, because at the speeds these things can do these days, you're going to need to be able to stop. So most of these bikes are dual suspension, but there's still some really aggressive hardtails out there that can handle some pretty crazy terrain. So you've got something like the Marin Elroy and the Kona Honzo ESD. But as I said, mostly dual suspension bikes, and these are going to start from around $2,750 to around $3,500. So some great options is stuff like the Norco Sight, Common Style Meta AM, and then the Vetus Escarp. And then also a classic option is the Specialized Stump Jumper Evo. Onto enduro bikes now, and these bikes are designed to get you up to the top of the mountain and descend down some pretty gnarly descents, or more simply to just race enduro. Bigger jumps and drops, rough terrain at speed is an enduro bike's bread and butter. With the expansion of the Enduro World Series, it's been a super popular category of bike, which has led to a lot of people over biking, when in reality, probably an all mountain or a trail bike would be ideal. So if you're stuck between an Enduro bike or an all mountain and trail bike, I would really ask myself is, am I attacking this terrain like a racer would, especially down rough, chunky rock gardens at speed? Yes, you'll get a bit more cushion on the bigger drops and jumps on an Enduro bike, but the main benefit you're gonna notice is when you're going down those rough sections really fast. Another perk of an Enduro bike, if you are going to the bike park a lot more frequently, they might be a better option for you as well because they can handle a bit more abuse. And you can also really start to take advantage of the bigger jump lines too. So typically Enduro bikes, you're gonna find they have a 65 to 63.5 degree head angle, and your travel is gonna be around about 150 to 170 millimeters. So components are gonna be a lot more burly, so you're gonna have forks with 35 to 38 millimeter stanchions. So forks like the RockShox Lyric and Zeb and Fox 36 and 38. And you're gonna get piggyback shocks as well, and then you're gonna start seeing a lot more coils on there too for that improved rear suspension performance, especially on the rough stuff. 4-piston brakes are a must, and you're gonna start seeing some super tacky compounds on the tires, as well as some double down, more durable casings. So because these components need to handle a lot of abuse, the price tag's going up again, so you're gonna find the entry level is around about $3,000 to $4,000. And there's some great options out there around this price point, so you got the Vita Summit, Nuke Proof Mega, and then also something like the Marin Alpine Trail 2. On to super enduro bikes now, and these are pretty much downhill bikes that you can pedal uphill. I'd say these were reserved for the fastest riders who are really starting to attack those really rough descents, so there's black and double black diamond and even the pro lines as well. Because they are a little bit more agile than a downhill bike, they're also used for freeride a lot these days, and they'll also be raced by enduro pros on the roughest races of the season, where there's minimal flat sections where you have to do a lot of pedaling. A great example of this is EWS Whistler. A lot of enduro pros will typically ride the super enduro option in their lineup versus their classic enduro bike. So you'll find that super enduro bikes will sacrifice a little bit of pedaling efficiency for outright descending performance, and you're going to find that forks have that 38 millimeter stanchion, so they're really taking advantage of forks like the RockShox Zeb and Fox 38. And you're gonna run around about 170 to 180 millimeters of travel. A lot of these bikes will also have the option to run a dual crown fork as well, so they're compatible with that. And then there's a lot of personal preference in between running a coil as well as an air shock. And you'll also find a lot of these bikes you can adjust the progression through a flip chip as well. And for stuff like the tires, you're gonna find super grippy tires with pretty much downhill casing as well. And you're gonna find some pretty burly brakes and rotors too. So great examples of these kind of bikes is stuff like the Norco Range and Shore, the New Proof Giga, and also the Rocky Mountain Slayer as well. So lastly, we have downhill bikes, and you guessed it, they're designed to just go downhill. So these bikes are pretty much reserved for people that go to the bike park all the time or have easy access to a shuttle. So the main difference between this and a super enduro bike is the travel. So you're gonna have around about 200 millimeters of travel. And again, no dropper pace because no climbing. But the main visual difference is you're gonna see that dual crown fork. So that's standard on all downhill bikes. And then the head angle is a little bit slacker too, at 63.5 to around about 62.5 degrees. Other than that, you're gonna get super tacky compounds with DH casing, 4-piston brakes with some huge rotors. Some classic example of downhill bikes is the Trek Session, which everything looks like, the Specialized Demo and the Canyon Sender. But on the more value end of the options, you've got stuff like the Vetus Domineer and Nuke Proof Descent, and they're gonna be around about $3,750 to $5,000. So there you go. Hopefully that provides you with enough information to make an informed purchase on your next bike. And again, if you are interested in more specific bikes in each of those categories, subscribe to the channel for the 2022 mountain bike buyer's guides. But in the meantime, as I said, check out those 2021 lists. I'll leave them in the description, the playlist is there. And if you are interested in purchasing a Marin or a Polygon, I do have an affiliate link for bicycles online in Australia and the US. And then also if you're interested in a Nuke Proof or a Vetus as well, I've got an affiliate link for those and I'll leave them in the description. So if you want me to keep making content like this, it's a great way to support the channel. So if you have any questions about anything or you want me to make another video, maybe stuff around wheel size, frame material and stuff like that, leave it in the comments below and I'll get around to answering it. But as always, thanks for watching. See ya.